ladies and gentlemen, welcome, welcome. Now, this should be a familiar sight for most of you. This, of course, is the lovely skyline of our very own city of Houston. Now, if you wanted to do a little stargazing, this probably is not the best place to do so. For starters, you might have to dodge a little traffic while you look at the sky in the middle of the freeway. But other than that, the bright lights from our city and our civilization may have an unfortunate side effect of washing out a lot of that starlight in the sky. We call that light pollution, and it can get quite annoying for us astronomers. So to get a better look at your sky, you need to get away from all these lights, away from the city. Somewhere like here, for instance. This is our George Observatory down at Brazos Bend State Park. Thrilled to let you all know it is now finally reopened to the public. So we'd love if you could join us for an evening down at Brazos Bend. Let's go ahead and take a quick peek inside here, so we can get a look at the 36-inch telescope here at George. Now, there is a chair off to the right if you kind of want to get a sense of scale for things here. Since we humans are, at least for the moment, kind of stuck here on Earth, telescopes are the best tool we have for exploring things out in space. You can point them at any spot in the sky, and you will be sure to find something very, very interesting. So let's now jump on through our telescope here and see what our sky has in store for us tonight. Now isn't this much better? We can see many, many more stars out here. Now, if anyone has ever played Connect the Dots, then you've got the idea behind constellations. These patterns in our sky help us find our way around a little bit. It's a little like having a map up in our nighttime sky. We can use them to divide up the sky into little bite-sized sections to better help us find our way around. Now, unfortunately, we don't have quite enough time to go through all 88 of the constellations today. So we're going to roll things back a little bit here. But before we do, just so you are aware, that device in your pocket can actually be a great tool for stargazing. On both iOS and Android, there are dozens of free astronomy apps where you can take your phone, point it up at the sky, and it will tell you exactly what it is you're looking at. Do try Sky Map or Star Walk. Both of those are excellent apps. Free too. But for right now, let's go ahead and roll things back a little bit here, so we can talk about a very special group of constellations, 12 of them along this imaginary line in our sky. This is the path that the sun appears to follow each and every day as the Earth turns, always looking like it's rising over in the east and setting in the west along this path here. But not only can you find our sun along here, but also our moon and all the planets as well. We'll be seeing those a little bit more in just a moment. But before we get started here, I'm going to rewind just a little bit here, right as the last of that sun glare is leaving the sky. So off to your west on your right, you may be able to spot the heads of two stick figures holding hands. These are Gemini the twins, one of the first of the zodiac constellations we're going to talk about today. And in this part of the sky, we have a planet. Venus will be big and bright on our western sky this evening, so do be sure to get a look at Venus. Now, some very exciting recent developments happening regarding Venus, which we'll be talking about a little bit later. But for right now, let's shrink Venus back down to its actual size and move time forward once again. Now that all that sun glare has left the sky, the next up in our zodiac here, we have Cancer the Crab, where we will have, yes, another planet in this part of the sky tonight. Our neighbor to the other side of us, Mars, will be hanging out over in Cancer the Crab this evening. And we're going to be talking a little bit about Mars too, because there are also some really interesting things happening on the red planet right now. So do stay tuned. But let's go ahead and fill out our zodiac here. Next up, if you can look for a big backwards question mark in your sky, you will have found the mane of Leo the lion, followed up by the lovely Virgo here on her side, right about where our moon will be this evening. We've got a nice gibbous to it. It's going to get larger and larger over the next few days here, but you'll have a great look at your moon right after 10 o'clock this evening. let's go ahead and point out that up next we have Libra, the Scales of Justice. This next one right up here is one of the most prominent constellations in our summer sky. If you look for the big capital J here, you will have found the long, spindly body of Scorpio, the Scorpion, with its fiery red heart, Antares, a red supergiant star nearing the end of its life, and also one of the brightest stars in our summer sky. But speaking of sky, we're running out of it here, so let's go ahead and move the time forward here. As we do so, things set over in the west while more things rise over in the east. Up next, we have the tea kettle. Well, not really. This is, in fact, the bow and arrow of the mighty Sagittarius, the centaur. And I do want to take a brief moment to hold right about here. This is a very interesting spot in the sky, folks, right in between these two, Scorpio and Sagittarius. About 30,000 light years that way is where the very center of our Milky Way galaxy lies. And there is something very cool waiting for us there, but for now, no spoilers. Now, there is a constellation up in this part of the sky, which is not one of our zodiac, but I did want to go ahead and point it out here, because there's a pretty cool object over in Hercules, the mighty hero, right above Scorpio. You can find it. Now, there is an object up here which we call a globular cluster. Isn't that a fun word, globular? Well, we'll get a closer look at it later, but here is a sneak preview of what it looks like through the Hubble Space Telescope. These are some of the most beautiful things in your sky. These clusters of stars packed really closely together. Again, stay tuned, and we'll talk a little bit more about this spectacular object shortly. Just keep in mind where it is in the sky. But for right now, let's go ahead and finish out our night. Next up, we've got a kind of a lumpy triangle shape here, which makes up Capricorn, the goat fish. A very creative combination there, if you ask me. And in this part of the sky, you'll have yet another planet. The lovely Saturn will be over here tonight, or in the early hours of the morning. Now, up next, kind of leaning off to one side, we have Aquarius, the water bearer, where you will find Jupiter as well in this part of the sky. And then right next to the water bearer, we have the twin fish Pisces. And then, unfortunately, well, eventually the sun must come up and ruin everybody's good time stargazing. Oh, what a spoil sport. But right before the sun, you might just be able to spot Aries the Ram peeking above your horizon. But now, ladies and gentlemen, we are going to, at this point, shift gears here a little bit. We are now going to trade our telescope in for a spaceship. We're going to leave our Earth behind, fly through space, and get a closer look at a few things. Let me just rewind just a little bit here, because our first destination happens to be the moon. So let's now plug in the coordinates and head on out. And there we go, the lovely city of Houston rapidly falling below us. Oh, and it looks like we're upside down, but that's okay, no up or down in space, right? So no harm, no foul on that front. And now we're going to leave our lovely blue planet behind and head on over to our closest neighbor in space, our lovely moon. And while we're here, folks, one thing I wanted to point out is that, unfortunately, for the moment, this is kind of it for us humans. This is as far as we have been in space, and we went quite a while ago with the Apollo missions. 50 years ago now, we landed 6 times on our moon. But don't worry, hopefully it won't be too long before we go back. I have another image for you here, a real one from Apollo 17, where we can see the lunar surface in all of its glory here. Now, hopefully, by 2024, we're going to be back on the moon. Let's see, SpaceX has won the NASA contract with their Starship to take astronauts back to the moon by 2024, and that will be quite the spectacular thing to see. We also want to build a permanent space station in orbit of the moon called the Gateway, and that will make a very convenient jumping off point to start reaching out. and going to some of the other planets of our solar system. Solar system, right? Speaking of which, let's do just that. Let's now head on over to a planet you're going to be seeing quite a lot of for the foreseeable future because of all the exciting things happening there. Let's now mosey on over to Mars. And here we are. Welcome to the Red Planet. Now, you might have spotted two tiny dots around Mars as we approach. Mars happens to have two tiny moons. Here they are, not nearly as impressive as our moon. Their names are Deimos and Phobos. Deimos only about 8 miles across, Phobos about 14. We think they're little tiny asteroids that Mars grabbed onto on their way inwards from the asteroid belt and are now Mars' two tiny moons. Well, let's now talk a little bit about Mars itself, because when we humans finally do get here to the Red Planet, it'll have a couple very interesting tourist attractions for us, believe it or not. There's one, we'll get to that one in just a moment, but I want to start right about here. Let's talk volcanoes. Mars has a few dozen of them on its surface. Here are 3 big ones in a row, but this one right up here happens to be the largest volcano, or even just mountain, in the entire solar system. Very appropriately named too. This is Olympus Mons. You would need to stack 3 Mount Everests on top of each other to reach up to its peak, and if you were to scoop up this whole mountain and bring it back to Earth, it would be big enough to cover most of, not quite all, but most of the entire state of Texas. It's absolutely enormous. So that's one way to get your steps in on Mars. Another is the longest canyon in the solar system. This is the Valles Marineris. No, you will not find pasta sauce here, but this is still a really, really interesting place to explore. How does this thing stack up to things on Earth? Well, it's so long, it could cross from coast to coast, clear across the whole United States, and putting our Grand Canyon to shame by quite a bit, unfortunately. As lovely as our Grand Canyon is, it's only a little tiny dent compared to the mighty Valles Marineris. And just like our Grand Canyon here on Earth, well, something had to carve out this canyon here on Mars. Turn back the clock a few billion years, and we think the Red Planet might have looked much bluer, even having oceans of liquid water on its surface, just like the Earth today. Now, of course, Mars today is a dry, cold desert of a world, but regardless, we think it might have had a very interesting past. And on that note here, let's now talk a little bit about Perseverance. Now, on February 18th, NASA landed our brand new rover on the surface of Mars. These are the gray plains of Syrtis Major, and off in a corner here is a gigantic impact crater we call Jezero. Now, this is a place we believe long, long ago was a gigantic lake, larger than Lake Superior here on Earth, and filled with water. There's evidence for that all over the place. You'll see that big squiggly line up there? Well, that sure looks like it used to be a river. This would be the river delta where that water flowed into the crater. And parked conveniently right next to that river delta is our brand new rover, Perseverance, or Percy as some like to call it. But Percy isn't alone on Mars. For the very first time on another planet, we've also brought a little helicopter with us too. And this is quite the milestone, folks, because this is the first time we have flown something on another planet. It's up to, I believe, 6 successful flights now, although it had a couple technical issues on that last one. Since it's been doing such a good job, it's now going to act as a little scout for the rover. It's got a little camera attached to the bottom, and since it can fly, it could go a little farther ahead, take pictures from up above, and if it spots any interesting rocks or landscape, then Perseverance can roll on over to go check it out. So we are really, really excited about our 2 little robots on the surface of Mars. But the main goal, let me pull up another actual image here. The main goal of Perseverance here on Mars is to look for evidence that that water was once flowing here long, long ago. And maybe, just maybe, if there was water here at one point, there is a teeny tiny chance that there could have been some form of life here too. Now I want to be clear, we are not talking little green men or Grogus or anything along those lines. Nope, you go away, we're not going to find you on Mars, as adorable as that would be. But perhaps Perseverance will stumble across a rock, inside of which could be some fossilized microbes or bacteria. It's even been theorized there could be some coral here. But we need to give our robots a little more time to do some science and give us a better idea of what Mars was like long, long ago. Now, ladies and gentlemen, we've checked out one of our neighboring planets, and now I'd like to take you to our other neighbor, to the other side of us. Because some interesting developments happening on our sister planet, Venus. Now, I just called this our sister planet. Why is that? Well, Venus here is just about the same size as the Earth. It's got just about the same gravity. However, let's just say the climate isn't quite as agreeable. It's got a nice balmy surface temperature of over 950 degrees. And as if that wasn't enough, you also have a forecast of sulfuric acid rain. Ooh, that does not sound very pleasant. But you know what? We're feeling adventurous today, so let's now go down to the surface of Venus and see what that might look like. Oh, well, isn't this lovely? Anyone bring marshmallows? We got a nice big volcano in front of us to roast them on. And as I mentioned a moment ago, that's not water falling on your head. That is sulfuric acid, which can eat straight through metal in a matter of minutes. Now, things might seem rather unpleasant here on the surface of Venus, but despite all this nastiness down here, NASA has announced last week that we want to send a rover here. Yes, a rover. And this would be quite a challenge, folks, because all of our circuit boards, our electronics, our semiconductors cannot withstand 950 degrees for very long at all. So these robots, when we design them, are going to have to be largely mechanical. If anyone is a fan of steampunk technology, this will be right up your alley. It's got a little windmill to help power it a little more. Can't use rubber tires on a planet that's 950 degrees, so those have got to be metal too, and all of its